Hello, BookTube. I have another subject on which I want to probe you. Are you quite ready, personally, emotionally, physically, even spiritually, for another Steve probe? The subject is libraries. Your public library. I want to ask you all sorts of questions about your library. It's become fascinating to me. A friend of mine is working on a long article, and we've had lots and lots of email exchanges on the subject of what is going on with libraries now in the United States. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't want to hear about your experiences elsewhere, but I admit I'm particularly interested in the United States people because in the United States, the latest relatively reliable statistics say that nearly 70% of adults have a library card, and that's a large number. That's a huge percentage. Now, a lot of them probably stick it in their billfold and never think about it again. But uh, library usage is holding fairly steady. The statistics are a little bit dodgy, but they also track different demographic groups. And Gen Z and millennials, it seems like their library usage is up, that it's increasing in the last couple of years, in the last few years. In the information, I think for obvious reasons, we want to start looking only at information after COVID started to release its iron grip on society, because that changes everything. When you can't leave the house, that changes everything. But after that, it looks like millennials and Gen Z are making lots of use of their library. Up a little, maybe, from earlier statistics, but they don't seem to be using the library for conventional means anymore. They don't seem to be borrowing as many books, newspapers, journals, as they are doing other things with them. And one of the statistics that I saw, one of the figures that I saw across a number of different surveys, is what that thing is. What the thing is that Gen Z and millennials seem to be increasingly using their libraries to supply, and that is the concept. Maybe you've heard of it, of a third place. The idea being that in a healthy social environment, you will have your home, you will have your work, and you will have a third place where you can go, where you can socialize, where you can congregate, where you can relax. The relaxation part, often in discussions of third places, is what rules out churches. Although I know a lot of people who could not live without their church being their third place. There are ladies who go to a church just up the hill from me. I've had many conversations with them over the course now of 3 different dogs. I've had many conversations with them about what they get out of it. They're remarkably open about it. Once they realize I'm not trying to trick them, then they're remarkably open about it. And for them, it is that kind of a third space. Prayer notwithstanding, they go and socialize there as well. For them, it's vital. And it's vital in a way that even those ladies with their huge ornate hats were willing to admit to me was not all religious. That there wasn't a very active social element of it. Okay, well then in their case, their church is a third place. But usually that's out, especially since uh, believing church participation in the United States, like everywhere else in the developing world, is cratering. People just don't do it anymore. Uh, and that has left a void. And sociologists have been talking about this for a while, that you need a third place to go where you are comfortable, where you are known, where you are getting something, where you're being fulfilled. And it looks like from recent studies that Gen Z and millennials are increasingly using their library for that, as a place to go, and read or write in peace. It's generally a subdued tone. Of course, librarians will tell you the old idea that we're constantly shushing people is wrong. But nevertheless, libraries are generally subdued places. They're generally, in other words, peaceful places. They're places where you can go and just be with yourself, just be with your thoughts in peace. The My Beloved Boston Public Library, look how old this card is. I got it and I've just never changed it for a new one. And there's a reason for that, and we'll be getting to that. But My Beloved Boston Public Library, for instance, the old building, there's 2 buildings sort of grouped together next to each other. The new one has flowing lines and great Art Deco designs and a cafe and a bike rack and whatnot. The old building, which is co-joined to it and is right next to it, has an inner courtyard, a gorgeous inner courtyard with a fountain and a statue. The statue has a long storied history in library history, but it's an absolutely gorgeous place to go and just be by yourself. The old building also has Bates Hall. My second favorite place in the whole world, anywhere in the world, is Bates Hall. Where you can just go under the gigantic vaulted marble ceiling and just be with yourself. The library is not expecting you to buy anything. It's not giving you a time limit on how long you can be there. It's free to all. You very minimal requirements, and you can get a library card of your own. But you also don't need a library card to go and enjoy it. And therefore, it has undeniable attractions as a third place. It looks to me, from the studies that I have been reading in conjunction with my friend for months now, it looks to me like a lot of the very traditional aspects of a library are simply not used anymore. The uses are going down and down and down. Borrowing books, physical books that you borrow from the library, you get them and you take them home, you read them and you bring them back. That seems to be going down. Another thing that's going down is consulting your librarian about anything. The books in the collection or anything else. Once upon a time, 50 years ago, the librarians at the information desk, you would go and consult them about a whole bunch of stuff. It wasn't just, some of it was miraculous, and I knew some of those old libraries, some of those little small town libraries, some of it was miraculous. When you are a librarian, you start in very little time to accumulate all the knowledge in the world. You become the most glorious example ever of an autodidact jack of all trades. And 50, 60 years ago, people would come into that desk and they weren't going to borrow a book. But they wanted to know, the radio the other day said something about Mount Kilimanjaro and that it's in Africa. And I got to thinking about it. We don't have an encyclopedia at the house, but do wild animals live on Mount Kilimanjaro? The guy on the radio said that the top is covered with snow year-round. Do wild animals live on Mount Kilimanjaro? Are there polar bears at the top of Mount Kilimanjaro? And the librarian not only was expected to be able to talk about that, and also the correct way to sharpen ice skates, and also the correct way to diagnose the severity of an earthquake, but also the librarian was expected to be able to take you to something at the library. So we've got 20,000 books here. I know where to take you to sit you down at a table. If you came in, you have a question, maybe you have 20 minutes. Sit down at a table. Here's the book you need to flip through. Don't need to borrow it. Don't need to give a report on it. But this will do in much greater detail than I can, and I know where it is. I know exactly what will solve your question. Once upon a time, well, I say 60 years ago, but 100 years ago it was even more. Oh my God, 100 years ago it was the cynosure of your intellectual queries of any kind was your library's information desk. And it looks like that function is decreasing. People aren't using the libraries as much for that anymore, even to the extent of asking librarians at the desk where something is. And there's a reason for that, and we'll be getting to that. I worry that the reason why that is declining is basically the same reason why the whole Western world is secularizing, which is your iPhone. The reason why organized religion is dying is because everyone can look on their phone at any time and see not only their own religion being debunked, but also all the things their religion proposes to explain being explained elsewhere, and also by other religions. Once you have that, that's going to be tough. Unless you have heard that still small voice inside you, that is going to prevent you from hearing it. And I would say that cell phone is the same reason as well for why librarians are not consulted anymore, just in a general basis, why they're not consulted anymore. Sometimes I would gather they're consulted about where can I find this book? Where can I find this section here in the library? But in terms of general knowledge, what won the Pulitzer Prize 2 years ago? People can just get that on their phone, so they don't need to ask the person at the desk anymore. And I know, if I'm right about that, I know exactly what that feels like, because that happened in retail bookselling. Once upon a time, in my own humble way, I've never been a librarian, but once upon a time, in my own way, I did an equivalent of that at an information desk of a very busy retail bookstore in the last decade before the internet, where if somebody wanted to know what the Pulitzer Prize winner was from 2 years ago, or what do critics say about this year's Nobel Prize winner, or how many different translations are there of the Kalevala and what are their relative merits, I would get those questions. People would come to me and just literally line up at the information desk to ask questions like that. Half the people in my line at the info desk from noon to 2 were not asking where a certain book in the store was. They had a literary question or a book question of some kind, and they didn't have a device in their pocket that could simply answer it. Is so-and-so alive? What language did so-and-so originally write in? Questions like that, I could answer them, but their phone, they didn't exist yet for them to do. And I saw that stop. And the death blow, that it didn't stop on a dime, it declined, but the death blow after that was when the customers who are out there, so I'm talking about customers, could not only get the answer to their bookish questions right there at their desk, they could also order the book right there at their desk and have it sent to their home. No going to the bookstore at all. You don't need to go to ask a question, and you don't need to go to buy a book. Once that happened, the retail bookstore where I worked became a ghost town. I'd imagine that a lot of people in retail bookstores would say the same thing. And an equivalent of that also shows up on those library statistics, which is people realizing that they can borrow ebooks from their library, that they don't need to go in person unless they insist on a print and paper book. I think, if I remember correctly from the statistics, about 40% of all library users in the United States are aware of the fact that they can borrow ebooks from their library. And I think the percentage was something like in the high 90s for libraries that actually offer ebooks, that actually offer a collection of ebooks. So that's a huge discrepancy. That means that a lot of I think the latest statistic that I read was close to 130,000 libraries in the country of one kind or another, from the very small to the very big and very palatial. 130,000 libraries, 98% of them offer an ebook collection of some kind or other, or their network does. If that's true, the fact that less than half of the patrons out there would know that the ebooks are offered is pretty bad, and that, I don't know how you get the word out about that. That's interesting to me. But the people who do know, this is anecdotal, this is just me, just talking about people that I know, but the people that I know who are ardent library users, I'd say probably 90% of them don't do print and paper books anymore. Now that they know they can rent audiobooks from the library, they can rent ebooks from the library, they don't go to the library physically anymore. They get the ebook downloaded to their e-reader, they read it there, it disappears when the time is over, they go on to something else, and that's it. I don't know, I don't think I've seen good modern, recent statistics about what kind of traffic that is. But it can't approach normal borrowing traffic numbers anyway if only if fewer than half the patrons know that it's even possible to do. The statistics that I've seen most recently that are most solid and most ostensibly reported are from 2023. Of course, 2024 is still compiling. But those statistics lead me to think that libraries are still viable, but that their use case, to use the tech bro term, is drastically changing. And that brings me to the probe. It brings me to the probe of you. All of you, because I have access here, like I did the last time I did a Steve probe, I have access here to 1,000 avid readers. I have access to 10,000 bots, but I don't know how actively they read. But I have access to 1,000 avid readers. All kinds of readers. People who only reread. People who only read classics. People who only read new releases. People who only read a handful of genres. People who read 20 books a year. People who read 200 books a year. People who read 1,000 books a year. I have access to so many different kinds of readers in all their variety. The thing I dreamed about when I came on BookTube, when it didn't yet exist on BookTube, I dreamt that BookTube would one day come to mirror the complexity of the actual reading world. And now they're all kinds everywhere. And that definitely applies to libraries. Just among the 1,000 people that I reach with these videos, there are people who never use their libraries at all and never have. There are people who use their libraries almost exclusively. Whether it's electronic borrowing or going in person, making a ritual of going in person. And there are people who have switched over. In the time since they were raised on libraries, probably by their mother. They were raised on libraries. They were raised to love them. They were raised for them to be an integral part of their reading life. Don't need to buy everything. Not everybody has access to, a whole sale lot full of dollar books. You don't need to buy anything. A lot of people were raised with libraries being integral to their reading life, and then much later, decades and decades later, they slowly started putting their feet in the water of e-readers. of reading on your phone, which is a little awkward, of reading on an iPad, which can be a little bit rough on the eyes, or, best case scenario, reading on a Kindle, reading on a Kobo, reading on e-ink, where you barely need to think about the charge, and you could just read your heart's content all day long, all night long. And as they made the shift, those people, those ardent library users, as they made the shift to e-reading, their libraries made the shift to e-lending. So it was perfect. And that is, I think, in my own anecdotal experience, that is by far the biggest percentage here, is library users who now use the library without almost never darkening the doorstep of the library itself. They borrow digital books and they borrow audiobooks, and they get them delivered. They wait in line for them electronically. They get them electronically. They consume them electronically, and they are withdrawn. They are taken back electronically without ever a need to go to the library. And that makes me curious. I have 1,000 questions for you about your library, about your relationship with your library. Now, the overarching number one question is, do you have one at all? And that opens up a little bit of a sad picture. A lot of people that I know are in the same position as I am. I absolutely love libraries, and once upon a time, I lived in them. On and off, I lived in them. In a handful of libraries, I'd say probably 5 in America. One was very small. One is very old and private. It's not a public lending library. And the others were public lending libraries, most especially the Boston Public Library, the old building, the McKim, Mead and White building. I spent a huge amount of time in libraries, prowling stacks, finding things, the old serendipity of finding things at a library that you didn't know existed, and a huge amount of time writing and reading in libraries. There is something incredibly soothing, that third place thing, to doing writing and reading with other people around you doing that too, but not chattering and not wanting your attention. There's something really soothing about that. It really feels good to do that. I said I did it in intervals because I usually did it when I could, with a clean conscience, leave my dogs for any amount of time. Which, if you're a dog person, you know, you're not going to get that right away. If you get a puppy, you're not going to get that right away. But after a while, usually the demarcation point is 10 years. After 10 years or so, your dogs are going to sleep all day long. They're going to sleep all day long. And it's going to be deep sleep. It's not going to be the kind of sleep where they need you. They're not going to wake up. They're not going to want to snuggle with you. They're just going to be dead to the world. And that can go on for a while. That can go on for years. And usually sometimes I had dogs that didn't mind me leaving. If I had 8 dogs at the same time, they had each other. They didn't care whether I was there or not. So sometimes I could leave. There are plenty of years where I could. But the intervals that I remember are the intervals when I had older dogs. They were not yet sick. They were not yet dying. They did not yet need me because they were afraid. And there were long, long stretches of years where if I'd worked at home, they would just have been asleep. So I was free to go elsewhere. And a lot of those years coincided with my inability to do at home what I could do at the library. I had a small 2 shelves of research books for when I was writing something and I needed to know the exact date of the Battle of Sarmi-Zaragoza and Hadrian's participation in what was that date and how do we know that? I'd go eagerly flipping through research books and realize I didn't have that information. But that information is known because that battle is described in biographical sketches of Hadrian. So it will be at the library. And I just needed to go. I used to keep a list on my desk. I used to keep a library list of things I need to look up, check, and reference at the library the next time I go. That list dwindled to nothing once I had access to all the information that's ever existed in the entire world online. But once upon a time, I needed to do that, and I was free to do it because either my boys had each other and they could play and argue and sleep and roughhouse all day, or they were so old that they wanted to sleep anyway and I could just leave them. So there were many times, when I absolutely loved the Boston Public Library, lived in the McKim, Mead and White building. And like I suspect a lot of people, I don't do that anymore. Not just because of my dog, my little schnauzer. I'm talking about dogs. Let's probably give her a cameo appearance. She has discovered recently that she can cross this Bering Strait on her own. There's a gap between the chair and the couch, but she's discovered that she can cross it. So now she will often go over to the chair to stretch out. She doesn't like it when I leave at all. Not in the slightest. And because she doesn't like it, I don't like it. But in a couple of years, she's not going to notice. She's not going to care. She's going to sleep just like that. Well, she's going to sleep now when she's sleeping like that. About every 21 minutes, one eye is opening just so she can check to make sure that I'm here. And in a couple of years, that's going to stop happening. I don't think that I will go to a library even then. I don't have any need to. I have the internet. I have a laptop. I have Wikipedia and a whole little library of books all around me. I can't think of it other than that third place function. I don't have that third place function. I tell myself that I don't need it because the third place function is a very primate thing to do, and I was not raised or socialized by primates. I have all the socializing that I need right now and all the time. I do. And other people tend to want more than that. But I tell myself that, but that might not be true. It might be a thing that I'm missing it and just suppressing that. So I wonder if I might do more with libraries. I constantly think about doing more with libraries even now. My little dog is adaptable. She knows I'm coming back. She would adapt to me being gone for an hour here and there, an hour every 4 days. It's not going to kill anybody. But that's me. What about you? Are you in the same position? I am in the position that I'm describing here is that I once lived and loved the library. I knew all of its lendings. I knew all the kinds of things that libraries do that they don't advertise and that most patrons don't know they do. I knew the periodicals, especially the very expensive occasional journals, backwards and forwards. I knew them backwards and forwards. I knew the research library in Bates Hall backwards and forwards to all kinds of stuff in the holdings of the library that are not in general circulation, but that can be invaluable and fascinating. I knew all the incunabula of the Boston Public Library and also the private library here in Boston that I belong to. I knew all that sort of stuff, and I loved it. And then gradually I stopped using it, and without any diminution in how much I love it. That's the weird part, is that now in 2024, I absolutely love the idea of a library, but I don't use it anymore. And I'm wondering if you're in the same place. By far the greatest percentage of people that I know report that exact situation. They love the library. There are a lot of great memories of using the library and being an active user of the library, but they don't use it anymore. Once in a blue moon or never. Or they use it, but only virtually. They use it at arm's length. They will borrow electronic stuff and then the electronic stuff gets returned, but they don't go to the building. And I wonder if that's true for you. That is the essence of this Steve probe. Sorry for it to go on so long, but I do get nosy. Oh, if you could all come over here on Friday nights, that would be so nice. But anyway, this will have to do. That's the nature of this Steve probe. Tell me two things. First of all, because I'm nosy, this doesn't have any practical application. I'm just incredibly nosy. Tell me about your library itself. Is it big? Is it old? Are you lucky enough to have a Carnegie library? Is it a good staff? Is it crowded? Is it mostly millennials and Gen Z who are there, who use it? Is it young people? Is it old people? Is it a nice design? Is it an older place? Is it the feeling there generally one of lowering your voice and not making any noise, or is it a little bit more of a community center? I want to know about the building, in other words, and the location. Are you near it? Are you near to it? Can you walk to the library? All those kinds of nosy questions. But I also want to know the broader questions. Do you use your library? And how often? How vital a part is it of your reading world? For many decades that I've been alive, if you'd have said, what part of your reading life is your library? I've said it's absolutely indispensable. I use it all the time. And I would have said that would always be true. And it isn't anymore. I actually can't off the top of my head remember the last time I went to the Boston Public Library. Amazing to me to say that. And I'm wondering if that's true for you. Do you have fond, loving memories of the library, but you don't use it anymore? Because you've got Kindle Unlimited or lots of books on your shelves that you don't touch anymore, or maybe COVID got you out of the habit of doing that sort of thing. I want to know. And if you do use your library, feel free to tell me the extent. I would be happy to hear all of this. That's your Steve probe this time around. You and your library. Oh, we almost got through the video without the Indy 500. How much do you use it? What do you think of it? Where is it going? Does your library seem healthy? I want to hear all about it. So feel free to tell me in the comments section, leave me a Voxer message, send me an email. I want to know. I want to know the answers to all of these questions. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.